Hello, my name is Wolf, and I am a Thromboyan chieftain of the greatest nation on the planet of Degum, the Thromboyan Union, a proud and pure nation of tribal warriors. We're currently at war with many other nations and factions, but the most notable of which is the Confederacy of Banya, our arch nemesis. We've been on the back foot of these wars for far, far too long. It's time that the Union was under new leadership so that we could take our rightful place back as the leaders on a global scale. Long ago, before humans found their way to this planet, the Thromboyans were the one and only true pure species. Their civilizations and technologies were far more advanced than anything that this world has ever seen since. But after the tumbling of several cataclysmic dominoes, we reverted to a tribal state along with the humans. They've taken everything from us in an attempt to live in harmony, as they call it. But this is something that we cannot stand for. However, every good revolution needs a base of operations, and thus we are going to begin by collecting some of the planet's precious resources, such as lumber, to go about building one. We're also going to be collecting wild berries and other foods to survive off of for the time being, as well as collecting some wild medicines to protect ourselves from infections and disease. To begin, we're going to be building ourselves some small wooden canopies along with a campfire. Now, I know this doesn't look like much, hardly the beginning of a revolution, but trust me, we will be building something very big very soon. You see, the lands of this planet are littered with the ancient ruins of the lost Thromboyan civilizations from long since past, and we've decided to begin deconstructing those to build our new home and our new civilization that will be much better than anything before. To reclaim the lost glory of our species, we're going to first build ourselves a capital building, a planning ground for our revolution, something that I believe I'll be referring to as something of a citadel, I suppose you could call it. A large fortress made from the finest marble materials that our ancestors have to offer. On the upper floor, we're going to have ourselves a meeting hall where we will be planning out all of our revolution, from the invasions that we plan on carrying out, resource alignment, and other things that I can't think of at the moment. And with that, it's finally completed, or at least the upper hull for now, and the external portions, built on a mighty foundation, as all good things should be. As for the name of our mighty settlement under the Thromboyan Union, we will be naming it Ancestors Landing, and I mention that because we are still part of the Union for now. And though in the very near future we still plan on carrying out our mission under the name of the Thromboyan Union, our faction, our government, and our civilization will be very, very much different than the current Union. Finally, one that we are proud to carry out our mighty mission under, even if that means we have to take the current one by force. But before we can make that dream a reality, we still have a lot of work to do. For example, we need to build some proper storage here in the old citadel. Not only are we going to be building plenty of big wooden shelves to store all of our goods on, but we're also going to be making ourselves something of a cellar and or crawl space where we can store excess resources and items away from the prying eyes of any visitors. The next thing we're going to be building is something of a small barracks, just temporarily for the time being, as it sure as shit beats the hell out of sleeping outside. We were also in dire need of a proper tribal kitchen equipped with a nice campfire where we can cook our meals, as well as some food storage barrels. It felt ever so nice to finally destroy our old shabby camp, and we could finally come inside to a nice sturdy home. We would also focus on growing ourselves some food, that way when winter comes around we don't have to rely on trading with the main government government or other factions for it. We ended up having a transport pod crash nearby the citadel, and upon further inspection, it appears to be a Thromboian, but this wasn't anyone that was part of the Confederacy of Banya or the Union. No, this appears to be some sort of civilian contractor from the Republic of Libertas, yet another faction on the planet that is predominantly made up of humans, but also lives in harmony with all races. Yeah, sure. This poor Thromboian child led astray away from the great truth of our ancestors into the loving hands of the enemy swine. We shall tend to her wounds and bring her back home where we can show her the truth. Though no doubt it's going to take quite a while to get past years of brainwashing with some brainwashing of our own, so we'll check back in on her in a little while. In the meantime, we're going to put a heavy focus on collecting plenty of resources such as stone blocks, as we're going to be cutting these from all the chunks in the area. This was ever so briefly interrupted when we were attacked by a maddened squirrel, but I'd be lying if I said that it was really worth mentioning. I mentioned it anyways though. Anyhow though, the reason that we've been collecting up all of our stone blocks is because we plan on making a very long and sturdy bridge across this gigantic ass river between our citadel and the mainland. This will make traversing the nearby area much easier, even more so when we end up building ourselves a little bit of a packed dirt path through the area as well. Much easier for trade caravans to arrive and also to trade with us, and also for us to leave. But after that, we ended up having someone by the name of Quinn who was saying that they were being held prisoner by the Confederacy of Banya, and that if we were to rescue them, they would be willing to join us. Naturally, of course, we would accept this offer. We're not one to turn down a Thromboian in need. Well, we assume they're a Thromboian. We couldn't exactly see what they looked like, and if they're not and they're human, we might just enslave them. But upon our arrival at the camp, it does indeed seem that they are a Thromboian. Along with them, though, are some of the Confederacy's finest soldiers with their scrap and makeshift rifles. The tribes of the Confederacy know no purity or tradition anymore, and this is the exact reason that they must be cleansed. As the two soldiers approached, we rushed to cover behind some nearby ruins. Though our bow and arrow would deal much more damage than their rifles could inflict, the chance of us hitting them more times than they hit us were quite low, so we had to get up close and personal to finish this off. And after a few slashes and gashes from the old scythe, we were victorious. We would also take their weapons to ensure that nobody else gets their hands on them, and we would also offer a sweet and savory rescue to Quinn, who would quickly, as you could imagine, join us. It would seem that Quinn was already part of the Greater Thromboian Union faction, and he will now be joining us as a member of the Citadel. After we all had finally returned home, we started on a new project, using the most abundant resource that we currently have at our disposal, that being stone blocks. Of course, we began crafting up plenty of hatchets. Not only would these be good tools to defend yourself with, but this is also a great tool for cutting down wood. The idea here is that we're going to be selling these as a way to make plenty of silver, as every great revolution requires a bit of funding. And in the meantime, we're also going to be building some proper homes for all of our soldiers and other members. Nothing too fancy, just some residential areas that are all connected, that way they can share the heat with some decent furniture. Perfect timing as well, because not too long after that, we would also finally recruit the Thromboian known as Twiggy, who had fallen in the transport pod, and we have converted her to the light of our ancestors. I'm sure that the rebels from the Republic of Libertas will not like this, as we're currently already at war with them, and this is only going to further the tension. So we're going to need to start mounting a pretty decent defensive position around the citadel if we hope to survive, as I'm sure they won't take kidnapping and ideological conversion all that well. But first, we have a very large stockpile of our hatchets to go about selling, and lucky enough for us, it would seem that the main Union government has sent a war merchant to us to purchase all of these hatchets. Although I must say that after selling all of our current inventory, I was less than satisfied with our compensation, as you can see. We were hoping to make buku bucks, but it looks like like we're only making scraps. Perhaps we should try art next time once we have someone with the proper skill set. Since we're not exactly making our fortune when it comes to stone weaponry, we've also decided to begin planting a field of cash crop. In this particular instance, we're going to be sowing some cotton, that way we can harvest it and sell all the cloth. Now, I did briefly touch on the fact that we're trying to make a lot of money, that way we can fund our revolution against the government, and that way we can take over, but to be honest with you, to be a bit more specific, we really just need to purchase firearms. Now, in previous years, the Union and its people have been completely opposed to these human-made weapons, but to combat humans as well as our enemies in the Confederacy, we have to. Speaking of other things that we'd have to do, we have to go about upgrading our little prison because the little wooden shack hole thing that we made previously just wasn't cutting it in terms of quality for our prisoners, and thus as to why it took forever to recruit Twiggy. Our big muscly compadre Abanir here actually has a pretty high artistic skill, with it being a skill level of 7, and since earlier I mentioned that maybe we should try some art instead of weapons, I think that's exactly what we'll do. We would even allow Gray to help him out here and there, though her artistic skill is obviously much lower. Every little bit of sculpturing helps out. A bit later on, and we ended up having a wanderer by the name of Dodo who was offering to join us here completely free of charge, and every able-bodied soldier we can get to this revolution we will take. After her arrival though, we had an unusual cold snap set in late fall. Seems pretty usual to me, but okay. We were none too concerned with the abnormal freezing temperatures. We just simply built a few more burning torches in our bedrooms to keep us nice and warm. Unfortunately, the biggest issue is that it killed off all of our crops, like our rice, which wasn't too big of an issue realistically because we could always hunt wild game, but that does mean that our cash crop of cotton is going to have to wait until spring. Speaking of cash though, we've decided to travel out to one of the main government settlements not too far from our home to do a little bit of trading with all of the hatchets that we made, as well as, more importantly, the sculptures that we've been creating, getting us a pretty penny racked in. We're really beginning to make quite the little stockpile of silver here. We should be able to purchase quite a few firearms with what we already have. But even if we do have enough firearms, we're going to get absolutely creamed and canned if we don't have proper defenses around the citadel, and that's exactly why we began building some around our bridge entrance as well as the opposite side of the citadel itself. And now, since we're becoming a proper community within the faction, I thought a proper road coming into our little community here would be quite fitting. That way we at least look the part, and for many days we would trade and bide our time. For what, you may ask? Well, we would wait for the Marshal Service. They're not exactly what I would call allies. They're a bunch of freaky fascists, and they also believe in racial purity, but only for humans, kind of like we do for our own Thromboian race. But they are an ally of circumstance to us because they, just as we, hate the rebels of the Republic of Libertas, as well as the Confederacy of Binya, and that is the exact reason as to why they are willing to sell us a few firearms. Finally, with these bad boys, though they be made of scrap and other shitty materials, we can do some damage, some real damage. Our ancestors did not take hold of this planet by using sticks and stones. No, they advanced in technologies, and as shall we. Even if these weapons are not of our own design, they are exactly what we need to take over, and to be able to truly fight back properly. Now that we have the weapons and we also have the numbers, it's time for us to plan out our very first attack. Near our border with the Confederacy, it would seem that they've set up a hunting work site just downriver from us a little bit. Now that it's winter time, the thick snow will cause us to take quite a while to arrive there on foot. But we don't plan on going on foot. Utilizing the wood that we've been chopping down, we are going to build ourselves some rowboats. These rowboats will easily allow us to travel down river over the frigid, freezing waters all the way down to this little hunting site much faster, I might add, than trying to make the journey on foot or even mounted on animals. As dawn began to break under the cover of a stormy morning, we would slowly and cautiously cautiously approached the shoreline. As we had finally crept around their defenses and around their structures, we would throw caution to the wind and begin firing at their door to bust it wide open. Within were a couple of filthy hunting heretics who thought that they could stand against us. Unfortunately for them, they were dead wrong. With what few hunters there were here completely dead, that means that we're going to be able to reap the rewards that they were going to take back home for ourselves and for our own community, which was perfect because we could really use some food for winter. And with that, it was time for us to take our spoils of war back upriver to the citadel. This was a great achievement, though our war with the Confederacy still easily rages on, and will continue to do so for quite a while. I think today we've proven to ourselves that we can take them on. But conquering the Confederacy is merely going to be our first step, as we still have to worry about our own government. In an attempt to make some new allies who may eventually need to come to our aid, we began trying to do some trading with many of the villages and towns and tribes in the Outlands, bettering our relationships with them as well as our wallets. Now, with all this newly found money, though, we would actually be able to hire some like-minded Thrumboians to set up some new settlements for the Union, but only for our chapter, as it were. We need to ensure that we know where their loyalty truly lies at the end of the day when the shit hits the fan, you could say. We're also going to begin arming them with some like-minded weaponry, a makeshift rifle, as well as some pretty shabby fatigues, you could say. It's time that we came out of the tribal era and into a more modern look and fighting force. Perfect timing to begin arming some soldiers, as it looks like the Confederacy is here to claim revenge for their hunting site being destroyed. And it looks like there's quite a few of them this time around. Luckily, our new settlements and bases were ready at a moment's notice, armed and willing. However, as we awaited their arrival, we would have to do this on our own, mounting a defense against the filthy Confederacy soldiers. We were far outnumbered and becoming easily overwhelmed. This would force us to begin making a retreat to the western side of the citadel. It would seem that we may have underestimated the retaliatory efforts of our enemies. As we were making our retreat, unfortunately, Wolf would be shot to the ground, injured and bleeding profusely, crawling away in a puddle of his own blood. But he would have to wait, as jumping out to rescue him right now would be a death sentence. We would have to fight our way out of this. A standoff would ensue near the citadel with the Confederacy soldiers. We began making our way a bit closer, where eventually we would finally kill enough of them that they began to retreat, or at least what was left of them. With our enemies running away, we would now need to begin tending to Wolf's wounds to ensure that he wouldn't bleed to death. And just as well, we also had a few Confederacy members who we thought could use a little bit of rehabilitation in more ways than just their injuries. Perhaps we can help them see the light that is their heritage as Thrumboians. But before we continue our glorious mission and takeover of these lands, we are going to need to heal for a little bit of time. Once we finally had an adequate amount of rest and our wounds had finally scabbed over and we weren't bleeding profusely anymore, we actually began working on a new residential quarter as well as a dining hall with a kitchen and food storage area. Early on, using our citadel as a kitchen and barracks is completely fine, but nowadays, now especially since we have a higher population and we're really beginning to form into our own little faction, I think it would be best to only use it as a base of operations and headquarters. And sticking with our theme of upgrading technologically, but also still somewhat being tribal, we are actually going to make a form of power production, but we are going to be using the beautiful planet of Degum's natural resources to do so, and I'm not talking about wood or coal. We are going to be using the rapids of the river to generate our power, and we're only going to be using it for the most necessary components of our survival, such as cooking meals, that way we don't get food poisoning and we're all well nourished to fight battles and to conquer. And as is tradition with our tribe, we are going to continue using our mother planet's wonderful wildlife to go about making our clothing and our meals as well, of course. Though a bit hard to see, we are wearing our more modern looking fatigues underneath our armored leotards and our animal skin hoods. Slowly but surely we continue to integrate more and more with the modern times, unlike our other tribal counterparts, while also keeping our culture and our heritage intact. As mentioned previously, we are no longer going to be using our citadel fortress for any type of production or barracks or anything like that, and thus why we are also creating a small area here for all of our stone cutting needs as well as art production needs. Not to worry though, as we are still going to be keeping a bit of our storage inside the citadel for the time being, as it is still currently the safest place for all of our products. We are also going to be collecting and harvesting all of our cloth that we've been growing for quite some time finally, now that spring has sprung. With that being said, we're going to be traveling a little bit to the west to trade with our official government counterparts. I'm still not quite as sure what we should be calling them, but anyhow, we are going to be selling them plenty of artworks as well as the cloth that we've harvested to make a decent bit of silver. And with all this money, we would actually be able to hire more like-minded Thrumboians from nearby villages and towns to go out and settle more bases for us. With us lining the pockets of these villagers and warriors, we now have quite the little militia, allowing us to begin attacking the Confederacy settlements. And while this is absolutely awesome and great and a huge milestone, this is still but the beginning. As you can see, it takes all of the soldiers in our militia currently to simply take over one settlement of the Confederacy, and this just so happens to be a much weaker one. Now, there's currently a lot going on the world map and in the world in general, but you may notice that we have some highways beginning to form out of not only our settlements, but the main government settlements as well, and this may seem a little odd, but we are currently working hand in hand with the RimWorld Marshal Service to build some proper infrastructure. Now, they may be filthy humans, but they are currently the ally of our allies, and thus they are our ally as well, so we might as well let them, I suppose. With things really going our way, and with a decent-sized militia under our control, I think that it might be time for us to get our hands dirty once and for all with the Confederacy. Playtime's over, bitches. We are immediately going to be making our way south to meet up with our militia members to go about attacking a nearby Confederacy resource depot. Now, all things considered, this is actually a pretty decent-sized base for the Confederacy, although there aren't all that many soldiers compared to a normal village, so it may be the perfect opportunity for us. Upon our arrival into the area, we would immediately send out the signal to nearby units to assist. These grizzled men and women are some of our finest soldiers, and though their weapons are not really up to par for planetary standards just as ours, they are still just as deadly. Under the cover of night and the shadows of darkness, they would begin to infiltrate the camp, opening fire on its members. We could hear the gunshots ringing out in the distance as we began making our way towards the chaos, the blunt roars of our warriors echoing throughout the hills nearby. As the fighting was going on, many fires had broken out around some of the nearby wooden structures. This would essentially make it impossible to hit our enemies at times, as the smoke was becoming so thick in some areas, at times it felt like we were blindly firing. But even so, we had used our element of surprise, and with our newfound weapons, numbers, and militia members, we would finally push these Confederacy bastards out of their own village, shrieking and groaning in pain as they ran away from the area, clutching their injuries. The battle against their soldiers had finally been won, but now a new battle would begin. begin. There's no doubt plenty of resources here, and we are now fighting against the clock to try to put out these fires before those resources are burnt up in one of these buildings. Eventually, we would find where they were hiding all of their jade and wood and even their food and different types of textiles, and we had actually managed to stomp out those fires, claiming these resources for ourselves. Not only resources, but we would also end up claiming a prisoner or two as well. After claiming our victory, we're going to be moving a little bit to the northeast here, just up against the shoreline. And to claim this area a bit more for ourselves, we're also going to be creating a specialized outpost. This in particular is going to be a hunting outpost where we basically will have people come and live and hunt wild game. We're going to be leaving Gray behind in charge of this outpost for the time being, as she is one of our closest and most trusted soldiers. Now, you may be asking, why did we even bother setting up a hunting outpost like this? Well, not only is this hunting outpost going to provide our main base at the Citadel with some wild game meat and feeding us throughout winter and what have you, but also all of our little villages and bases here in this area. And you'll also notice that I did specifically set it up here on the shoreline, and the reason for that is so that if we were wanting to take our vessels, like our little rowboats for example, down the river, we could actually meet at this base with our militia members. Essentially, it is a hunting outpost, but also a strategic military base as well, especially since it's also on the border of the Confederacy's territory. Now that we're finally back home, it's time for us to begin taking care of the more boring and bureaucratic issues of our little faction here. As the chieftain and/or lord of this chapter of the Union, that means that I am going to be responsible not only for killing our enemies and conquering new territories, but also for infrastructure and developing these villages and bases that we're setting up. The vast majority of our new villages are actually going to be exporting their timber, as it is the most abundant resource that they all currently have, with them being in a temperate forest, of course. After several days of setting up these logging camps, once they were finally complete, as you can see, we are making a very good bit of silver in taxes from our new villages. And this is the exact type of funding that we've been striving for this entire video to fund our revolution. But there can always be more, of course. The more the merrier, as they say. Besides, before we can inspire our fellow Union soldiers to rise up against the Union itself, we're going to need to make our name for ourselves, and of course the best way to go about doing so is to completely demolish the Confederacy. And as our power and influence continues to grow and get stronger, this will become much simpler and much easier to do, and eventually we will indeed topple them. Back at the home base, as you can see, I've made quite a few upgrades off camera as I was waiting for all of our settlement takeovers to happen, as well as our logging camps to be built, although it's just mostly some defense upgrades and new defenses with barricades, as well as adding in a few new roads for anyone coming and leaving the area. Nothing too spectacular. But my friends, as we're winding down to the end of the video here, I want to thank you all ever so much for watching. I can't tell you how good it feels to be back playing in the RkRu, especially as Thrumboians, for what I believe is the very first time. I mean, we've played as the pawn Thrumboian, like the race before, but never as an actual faction, never as a tribe or anything like that, so this is a pretty big milestone in our shared universe here. And it's also a hell of a lot of fun, I must say. I would also like to inquire about a little bit of assistance. I like our Citadel, don't get me wrong, but the name, the Citadel, is very reminiscent in universe of the Citadel that was built in the Outlands by the S&R Rifle Company just a few years ago. So we need something a little bit different to help set us apart from those filthy humans, I think, do we not? So I would like to ask you guys for any name suggestions, as well as any suggestions in general, mods, or where you'd like to see the series taken and stuff like that, of course, but in particular, a name for the Citadel. If you have suggestions, I'd very much appreciate it. But my friends, I will see you in the very near future. Until next time. Well, welcome back, my good friends. I'm ever so glad to see you back here with me today, my friends, where we are re-establishing the Thromboian dominance on the planet of Degum, and reasserting ourselves as the leaders and the #1 faction. Or at least that's the long-term plan. It is going to be quite a while before we get to that long-term goal, and we still have a lot of work to do before we get anywhere near that. So at the moment, we are currently doing plenty of construction around our city, including, but not limited to, improving our road system with some proper limestone bricks to make sure we have an ease of access and proper mobility throughout the city. Once that was finally completed, I noticed that we had our torches on the outside lighting up our city, going out, of course, because of the rain. Now, last episode, we began actually taking and producing power from the Mother Degum herself by using her beautiful rushing waters in the river, and of course, since we do have some electricity, it only makes sense that we would use that to also power some lights. I know, hardly a tribal dictator if we're using electricity, but again, we're only going to be using it for the essentials such as being able to see, of course. Not to worry, we're not going to stray too far from our roots in our ancestry, but as previously mentioned, our long-term goal of becoming an absolute powerhouse, a force to be reckoned with, is probably going to require us to upgrade a little bit in technology. Nevertheless, though, before we go about doing all that, we are currently having some power issues, and thus because of that, we're going to be building ourselves yet another water mill to generate even more power. Ah, yes, there we are, a nice bright city. We can see for miles all around our outer barricades. Now with these lights, there's about a snowball's chance in hell of those filthy Confederacy tribal warriors or the Republic of Libertas rebels coming up on us in the dead of night without us knowing about it. Speaking of which, those filthy humans continue to pollute this beautiful planet with their spaceship chunks and all their space programs that they seem to be running, and they just dump all the trash wherever they want. But luckily for us, we know how to refurbish these materials into the things that we need. Using the steel and electronic components from their starship chunks and their booster debris, we would be able to make ourselves a battery bank within the city, allowing us to charge up these batteries, and that way, if for some reason the river is going to be dry in the summer seasons or something like that, we'll still have plenty of power. We could also build ourselves a proper radio tower along with a terminal, allowing us to communicate with our soldiers in the field, as well as our other settlements that we've set up in towns and villages, as well as the main Thromboian Union government, but also that way we can start communicating with other factions like the Marshal Service and setting up some proper trade routes. Being a warlord isn't just all about killing your enemies and conquering new lands. That's only about 3/4 of the time. Sometimes you have to sit down and start filing some paperwork and looking over trade routes to make some money. Because continuing to make money is the only way that we can continue our expansion and our push of our borders towards the Confederacy of Banya's territory. Thankfully, though, the trade isn't just up to us here in the capital city at Ancestors Landing. No, we are also doing plenty of trading of lumber and other natural resources with all of these new villages and settlements that we're building as well, as you well know, I'm sure. Speaking of which, it looks like this season we're going to have quite a few yields of cloth from our fields, as well as plenty of stone artworks to go about selling. As you might imagine, the art and everything that we've been creating, though, is quite heavy, and thus we need some pack animals, so we went out and began trying to tame a few horses, which we are somewhat being successful at. At some point, we would like to probably get some more vehicles that are actually land-based instead of our canoes, but we're going to have to purchase some blueprints and also some components for that. One evening, the disgusting humans, who just so happened to be our allies by happenstance from the Marshall settlements, had come to do a little bit of trading trading with us. And yes, as much as we loathe the humans, for now it's best for us to stay in their good graces until we own this region. Besides, it seems like they might have some weapons for us. But trailing not too far behind them was a raid from the Confederacy of Benya, and with him were several attack hounds. As the humans approached and began telling us what they saw out there, we quickly rushed to our defenses and barricades around the bridge. The Confederacy tribespeople began attacking our civilian traitors. Their mechanical and robotic companions began to assist them and us, strangely enough, with taking out these bastards. We found this gesture to be quite odd, but we began to think that they were simply trying to protect their humanoid masters is all. Nevertheless, we would use this to our advantage. If these robots want to help us take out our enemies, we'll gladly let them. But as the Confederacy hounds began coming across the bridge, we began to make a strategic retreat back into the city, where we were startled by the fact that the martial police force and even the civilians were coming to our aid, putting their lives on the line not only for themselves, but for us as well. Thromboian and human standing shoulder to shoulder, fighting side by side. Maybe the marshals aren't so bad after all. With the assistance of our allies, we would manage to push the Confederacy out of our territory and out of our city, finally winning this battle for us and defeating the Confederacy once and for all. For now, at least. I wonder perhaps, have we been a little bit too harsh on our human allies? Maybe they're going to be much more useful than we give them credit for. Sure, their government hates Thromboians, but that also means that they hate the Confederacy. They could be a crucial part of helping us defeat them, as well as toppling the Thromboian Union itself, bringing the power to us. Only time shall tell, I suppose, but something tells me they probably wouldn't mind funding a civil war for a race of people that they hate. Speaking of war, I think we've put plenty of focus into Ancestors Landing, our capital city, in this episode thus far, and I think it's time for a little bit of conquering. I'm sure you all remember Abner from our first episode. She was one of the 3 members, along with Wolf, who had actually founded this city and this great movement, and thus why she is one of Wolf's most trusted friends as well as a soldier. But I think that it's time that we gave her a promotion to a chieftain, letting her run her very own raid against the Confederacy of Benya. Riding off on one of our new stallions on this rainy eve, she is single-handedly going to be making her way into the Confederacy's territory, and we are going to be claiming it for ourselves. Naturally, the journey shall take quite some time, so we'll check back in on her progress later. Besides, back home, we do still have quite a bit of work to do, not only on the city realistically, but just in our new civilization and our defenses, and that's why we're performing a bit of research on scrap metal workings, which will end up unlocking quite a few scrap weapons for us, such as a scrap turret, a very basic and the beginning of what is automated turrets. Our trusted fellow Quinn shall get right to work on that, and once he is completed, we'll be able to start building some of these. But in the meantime, we also noticed that all of our taxes that are being brought in from our nearby settlements are just kind of lying out on the ground. To be honest with you, I suppose we hadn't expected our movement and our new faction and group that we're creating to grow so fast. Thus, we really have nowhere to put all this. Naturally, though, of course, the only rational thing that we could do was to build some type of bank. Although this isn't actually a bank, this is going to be our tribal treasury for our entire faction. Any jade, gold, or especially silver is going to be landing on these shelves at some point and is going to be funding our uprising as well as our entire movement. Thus why we needed somewhere more secure, of course. It would seem, though, that Abner has finally arrived at a Confederacy settlement, and it's time that we get this party started. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. How on God's green daggum are we going to go about taking out all of these Confederacy soldiers who seem to be just as well armed as we are? with simply one Abonner. Well, my friends, Abonner is not alone, not by a long shot. Reinforcements had already arrived from every corner around this region. Each and every one of our settlements were pouring in resources and soldiers to help us take on the Confederacy. Blood was about to be spilled, and a lot of it. As a branch of the main Union faction, we've always had an opportunity to have better armor than the Confederacy, but it won't do us any good when we're completely outnumbered 2-1. But the difference, the thing that gave us an edge and an advantage against them in this battle is we weren't here trying to take their little village. No, we were going to burn it to the ground. They had everything to lose, and we had nothing but our lives to give. Abonner, sitting high atop her stallion, would continue giving orders to the soldiers, and we would actually begin pushing them out of their very own village. It did help us out quite a bit that our soldiers had already began setting fire to many of their food storage buildings and some of their homes as well. Wars are not won with chivalry and respect. They're won by fighting dirty. With the Confederacy fleeing the area, we would actually begin tending to our wounded to try and ensure that we could conserve as much life as possible. As for our enemies, we could have taken them hostage and maybe attempted to rehabilitate them or even to enslave them, but we wanted to send a message with this village, so we decided to finish them off. Not to worry though, as we had found some of the Confederacy's own slaves, one of them even being a Thromboian from the Union who had been enslaved, as well as a human from the Republic of Libertas. Nevertheless, we'll take them both back home. And with that, my friends, we have yet another glorious victory under our belt. Though we may have had many a casualty, we still won at the end of the day. Progress is progress, and we're heading in the right direction. I'm sure Wolf will be pleased. Abonner, along with the two enslaved folks, began making their way all the way home. In the meantime, it would seem that our other settlements were also having a good bit of luck taking over some more of the Confederacy's territory, getting our foot further and further into the door of this region. Meanwhile, back at the capital, we had also finally finished up our tribal treasury, and we're just now getting all of our riches moved over and stored in there for the time. We also finally finished up our extensive research into scrap workings, now allowing us to go about building some proper scrap turrets. As mentioned, these turrets are extremely basic and, to be honest with you, are just a pretty poor copy of human designs of automated turrets, but we wanted to try to do something semi-unique, though they be pretty bare bones. I don't think they're really sticking with our tribal heritage, but pretty close, kinda. Late one evening, Abonner, as well as our new slave companions, had finally arrived into the region. Immediately, we took them into our prison, and we plan on rehabilitating Ben here, our Union soldier, who's essentially been brainwashed by the Confederacy Thromboians. As for our human rebel from Libertas, we decided that we would enslave her. Sorry, lady, we still believe in a Thromboian racial purity, I'm afraid. Now then, I know earlier I said that I think we've worked on our capital city enough this episode and we need to start conquering. Well, there is a little bit of time here where we need to try to let our forces recoup and regroup and prepare for yet another battle. So during this time, we're actually going to be working on the city, and to do so, we're deconstructing some of our defenses here in the southern section of the capital, and we're actually going to be building ourselves a proper storage area. Up until this point, we've still been storing all of our resources and what have you, for the most part, inside of our little citadel area, but no more of that. Now, we are going to be keeping all of our weapons that we currently have in the citadel storage room, what used to be the storage room for all of our resources, and it is going to be functioning as something of a makeshift armory. We may end up leaving it as that, but we'll see. Now, last episode, I did ask you wonderful folks for some suggestions for what we should be calling the main building here within our capital city, as the Citadel is a term that the humans used a long time ago in the S&R Rifle Company, and we don't want any confusion, and of course we want our own term, so we have a great suggestion by our friend Civ Lover 10, who suggests that we call it the Ancestors' Spire, perhaps just the Spire for short, of course, and we could even imagine that there is a great marble thrumbo horn atop this little building, and I like the sounds of that, I really do, and I think that's awesome and badass. So that's exactly what we're going to be calling it, and there is indeed a great big marble horn atop it. Funny enough though, we ended up having Quinn, who was flirting with Abner, and the two of them have apparently become infatuated with each other and are now lovers. Ah yes, just a couple of kooky kiddos in love, and as they say, all's fair in love and war. Does that apply here? I think it does. The next project in the city that we decided to tackle was a few more fields to go about growing some rice and cabbage and things like that to feed our growing population, but we would also end up making a smaller field full of hay grass to feed our growing horse population. By this point as well, we were financially, well endowed, I suppose you could say, but we plan on reinvesting all of this money back into our growing settlements. And obviously, what I mean by this is going through and building plenty of logging camps and tree farms and things like that we can use for further trade and to make more money, and also we're going through and upgrading these settlements, reinvesting the money back in so they can grow larger and they can also support larger militaries, which is absolutely crucial. After all that reinvesting though, as you might imagine, we are flat broke, at least until the next round of taxes comes in, though I must say it was well worth it, as all our spending really helped with our military efforts as well, gaining more territory and taking more territory from the Confederacy. Meanwhile, back home at the capital, we're also working on some more efficient defenses, some proper walls that are going to be surrounding the city, keeping us safe and sound. You'll also notice we're putting some barbed wire out on the road as well, that way we can monitor who's coming in and out of the city, and we also have some embrasures in case things get a little bit hairy. This new stretch of wall is going to be cutting through the mountains all the way down to the river, completely cutting off any route other than the road leading into the city in the southern part of the region. But don't look now, friends, as we have quite the dastardly little group of rebels coming from Libertas looking to try to kill us. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that this very well may be our first raid from the Republic of Libertas. It would seem that they're finally getting knowledge of our large city that we're building here and the forces of our branch. I suppose we should be flattered. Well, we may be flattered, but we're not exactly grateful for the gigantic artillery that they're packing in their hands that they plan on blasting us in the face with. Though the rebels definitely have a technological advantage with the weapons that they're carrying as well as their armor, we have the advantage of numbers. A good example of this is when we were distracting this same rebel while Abner had snuck up from behind and Wolf finally put the nail in the coffin for her. But in killing her, we would also have access to her large machine gun, which would be perfect for finishing off her remaining friends. The rebels would attempt to hide in some nearby rock formations just outside the city, firing at us blindly, it seemed. Naturally, our soldiers were returning fire, giving us an ample opportunity to creep up around the exact same rocks when they wouldn't expect it. And after taking out her compadres, the last remaining rebel would also fall to our might. You poor, dumb creature, have you fallen this far from the truth? We shall help your eyes see the light of your ancestors once more. And as for your friends, we won't kill them. Well, at least not for right now. But we will be stripping them of all their gear and weapons and taking them to our prison to be enslaved. They are human after all. Though much of this gear is most likely better than what we're currently using with our more traditional armor and what have you, we don't plan on wearing it. We need to form our own different types of uniforms and armors to set us apart not only from our enemies but also from the main government of the Thromboian Union once we're ready for that, of course. Until then, perhaps we could sell this. Their weapons, on the other hand, though, oh mama, we were more than tickled to use those immediately. But after our epic battle, we must get back to the more bureaucratic things like setting up more trade missions and routes throughout our settlements, as well as instructing our soldiers a little bit bit? You don't get results like these just by blindly firing into villages. No, this takes strategy. But strategies don't win wars, or at least not just strategies, of course. Soldiers are also a very crucial part, and so is their food, their training, and most importantly perhaps, their equipment. And that's exactly why we're going to be utilizing a lot of our tax money right now to reinvest in some better equipment for more of our soldiers. Not to worry though, more taxes shall flow in, helping us replenish our treasury, along with much more trade with our human partners. But with such good relations, perhaps we could rely on them in a military fashion in the future. We'll see. Late one evening though, we would actually end up having a group of bounty hunters from our parental government stopping in the area. This wasn't a big deal, and obviously we don't mind, but I wanted to mention it because even our parent government, the Union, of course, as I've said many times over and over in the videos and the last video, they actually have some pretty good equipment, better than we do. But of course, they don't just give this out willy-nilly to any of the additional accessory tribes and branches like ourselves. And this is going to make things quite difficult when we inevitably attempt to overthrow them. But we will fight tooth and nail for our dream. A dream that we've had, that we will once again be the dominant race on the planet of Degum, and that one day everyone shall bow before our ancestral spire. And until that is achieved, we'll continue working towards it. For example, we are expanding the city yet again. This time around, we're actually going to be building some more residential housing, along with something of a workshop where we hope to begin making some types of forged weapons, axes, swords, whatever we need, as well as maybe some guns, our own brand of firearm. At one point, we ended up having a very well-skilled armorer in one of our nearby settlements asking us for some monetary funding so that they could create a very specialized set of armor for us. So, of course, we would spare no expense, and we gave them a pretty lump sum of silver. I'm sure this type of armor is going to take a long time though, so in the meantime we'll also take a look at all of the new Confederacy territories and villages that we're taking over. And I don't just mean look at as in the map, no, I'm going to take you down to the ground level. We're going to see what's really going on. I think that sums it up pretty well. You get the gist, right? We're not playing games. Though I must say, the enhanced trade relations with the Marshal Service has been a very crucial part, as we had previously mentioned it most likely would be, to our great successful conquering of these territories, essentially. After quite a few more days, we would eventually take every single settlement from the Confederacy on the mainland, forcing their remaining forces to retreat to a small island just off the coast of the continent, with only 2 more villages, cities, and/or towns remaining. I feel it's safe to say that the Confederacy has essentially been eliminated by this point. They are a shell of what they previously were, and as we look over the continent, you'll notice that we own a vast majority of this territory now, rivaling that of even the Thromboian Union. I think it's finally time, my friends. It's time that we abandon the pitiful and pathetic Union that has failed us around every corner, and we become our own nation. No longer part of the Union, we shall be known as the Federation of Thromboian Territories. The Federation for short. It's time that we finally achieved our goals and dreams. Well, word sure does travel fast. That's to be expected, I suppose. I'll see you next time. Well, welcome back, my little rambunctious rebels, to the Federation. I apologize, I know it's been a hot minute, but just needed to clear my head a little bit and think about our war strategy going forward. This type of conquest takes a lot of planning, and we need a clear head to do so. Last time I saw you, we had built ourselves one mighty big bank facility to store all of our new nation and factions riches in to fund this war effort. So it'll probably come as no surprise to you today that we plan on contacting our ally, the RimWorld Marshal Service, to request a trade caravan at the cost of some goodwill with him, but it will be well worth it to make some money and to continue filling up our coffers to fund the war. Now, not only do we have to hire mercenaries and purchase weapons and animals for those mercenaries to ride in on and this and that and resources and yada yada yada, but we also need to be able to fund things like a giant workshop, which we're currently building out of most of the materials that we've collected thus far, to create ourselves a place where we can build lots of weapons and armors. To be honest with you, I'm not quite sure last episode, since it's been quite a while, if this is what I was going to use this building for, but it is now. And right next to it, we're also going to be building ourselves a proper armory. I feel like that might have been what the workshop was going to be, but either way, it hardly matters, as we now have both of them. A place to create weapons and armor, but also a place to store all of them for our soldiers. Eventually, the trade caravan from the Marshal Service would finally arrive, and we had ended up purchasing quite a few assault rifles from them. In exchange, we would end up selling them some of our famous artworks for their more wealthy and luxurious benefactors. As I've mentioned countless times before, having better weapons is going to be absolutely crucial for taking on the Thromboyan Union, overthrowing them and replacing them with the Federation. Us, of course. And with this being our capital city, we need to make sure that we're well prepared. After that, we had a package delivered. Now, I know it's been a while, so just so you're aware, this is actually the armor that was created by one of our top armor smiths last episode when he was requesting some funding, and I think we gave him about 2,000 silver or so. It would appear that this famous armor smith has managed to design a new modern set of armor for not only Wolf, but for all of our troops going forward. Not only will this differentiate us from the Thromboyan Union of the past, but with the Federation, this armor will put us leagues above anything that they currently have. Now, this armor is great, and as mentioned, it is going to be much more superior and advanced compared to the tribal leotards and whatnot that the Union still currently uses to this day, but there was one slight problem. Resources. Something that this armor requires a lot of is plasteel, a resource that we currently don't have much of, nor do we have any veins on our area here where we can mine them and acquire it. But we do have an ally in the Marshal Service who just so happens to be the world's leader in mining plasteel for their devices and electronics. Thankfully, we wouldn't even have to call yet another caravan or go out and trade with the Marshal Service directly, since so many of our settlements and villages that we've been setting up around the capital have also been trading with them. Long story short, we already have some plasteel at a nearby village. Several hours later, and our soldiers mounted on horseback would finally arrive back home with not only a good bit of silver from the tithe that the village owed us, but also the plasteel that we needed for minion armor. Harrison, as well as Quinn, would waste absolutely no time beginning to design their own versions of the armor that had been sent to us by the armorsmith. They are slightly different from the main armor that was sent to us that Wolf currently has on, but I think that's fine, as it'll help distinguish him from the others, and of course they have some very similar stats, so it hardly matters. Something we all don't currently have that we've been providing to some of our mercenaries and other troops that we've been recruiting are a proper uniform. So while Harrison is performing some research into different technologies that we may need to help us win this war, like vehicles and things of that sort, we would also be tailoring up some proper camo fatigues for everyone. Finally, we will have our our own standard uniform for all of our soldiers and keeping it in the armory with all of our weapons. Any new folks that we end up recruiting or hiring or otherwise will be able to easily access all of these. We find that efficiency is top priority for winning wars, and that is exactly what we intend on doing. Finally, I feel that we are properly prepared for any type of invasion that comes our way, and we're also pretty fairly prepared to do our own invading. But first, we're going to begin spending our vast fortune on upgrading the gear of the troops in our vicinity around the capital and some of the settlements and villages and yada 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 that we've been founding. Now, of course, we are also going to be keeping our traditional tribal hood with this uniform so that we can always retain some of our ancestry and our culture. Now it's time for us to start winning, even more than we already have been, boys and girls. With our new weapons and gear, conquering the Union just got a little bit more easy. Although they are still putting up one hell of a fight, we expect nothing less from our own kinfolk. While our war bands and armies are regrouping back home, we started working on our defenses in the northeastern section of the city. If you remember last episode, we were building plenty of walls in the southern section, and the north was way too open. However, construction would come to a screeching halt the next day when we were being attacked by those same kin that we were trying to kill ourselves. They've come for retribution and revenge, and they're armed to the teeth. And along with him, they had a mechanitor, equipped with one of the ancient headdresses of our ancestors, and even with a small little war band of their mechanoids under her command. This should be fun, but also dangerous, no doubt. There's a reason that our ancestors use these bots in war. So, to even things out a bit, we decided to call in reinforcements, some of our newly armed and equipped troops. We were going to need all the help that we could get, and even if they were just a brief distraction to keep these mechanoids off our back as we were coming in to help them fight, that would be enough, I feel. Such a shame, a damn shame, seeing brother against brother. Most of these Thromboians are kin in some way, shape, or form, but they've strayed too far from the light and they've forced our hand. I'm afraid their only chance at salvation now is going to be to die at the hands of the Holy Federation. We would operate in close quarters as a team against the remaining Union soldiers, as our reinforcements would take care of their mechanoids. And once we were ready, we would begin pushing forward, chasing them out of our capital city territory, also chasing down the mechanitor herself. Once the filthy loyalist scum had fled the area, we could inspect her corpse. Thankfully, it would seem that there was no damage to her skull or brain. Why is that important? Such a strange question, you ask, but here's an even stranger answer. She happens to have a mech link, a little chip that has been installed inside of her brain that allows her to command mechanized troops on the battlefield, something that we might find useful. We would take the filthy loyalist corpse straight into our research building, the laboratory and/or makeshift laboratory, so that Erison could inspect it and see what she can do with that chip. Whew. I will tell you, killing our brothers and sisters and other kinfolk in a civil war is a little bit more depressing than we would have thought. Yeah, but it is a necessary evil. Sometimes to make an omelet, you have to crack a few heads. No, that's not right. Either way, though, there's no going back now, even if we wanted to, which we definitely don't. So, we need to ensure the proper protection of our capital here by finishing up our northeastern wall. Just as with our other segments of the wall, it is going to have embrasures on the inside as well for us to fire out at our enemies. Now that this part of the city is finally secured, we could also begin working on some farming up here. Now, as strange as that sounds, we need to feed our growing population, although we also do need to make money, and we also need to fuel vehicles once we get those built, so many things up in the air at once. We have decided that we would begin growing some chem root. Now, this is going to allow us to essentially make our own chem fuel, and we'll be able to fuel not only the war, but our vehicles of war as well. And if we really need to, we could also sell sell it, of course. As for some other resources like fur to use in our new uniforms and meat for all of our fine folks in the capital city to have a steak dinner with, we would end up receiving that from the hunting site that we had set up, I think 2 episodes ago, maybe episode 1. Either way, we are finally getting quite a few resources from it on the regular. Anyhow though, sticking with the theme of fortifying the city, at our new entrance in the north, we would also end up building a few sandbags for cover and our own protection, and we would end up doing the same with some barbed wire. Entrances like this will make it incredibly different for any of our enemies, in particular the rebels, who have a smorgasbord of different types of vehicles to come through these entrances with vehicles. And we're also going to be focusing on constructing a refining facility near our Kimroot farm. Now, of course, as far as I'm aware, we don't actually have to refine the Kimroot itself, but it is kind of fitting for the area, of course, and while we're waiting on the Kimroot to grow, we can actually go ahead and start refining other types of organic material into Kim fuel for vehicles and also to sell, as previously mentioned. Gases and oils are a hot commodity in this modern age, and the more of it that we have, the more friends that we'll have, mark my words. Speaking of which, well, what have we here? Peace talks with the Oak Foundation? In case you're unfamiliar or have forgotten, they're basically the CIA of the Republic of Libertas, the rebels, led by the infamous Lurkat, a Thromboian man who was once enslaved by humans himself as a young boy. It's no wonder he is the one to speak with us. I know what you're probably thinking, screw 'em, but on the contrary, my friends, we are trying to take over the Union. If we were to befriend the rebels and the Marshal Service, the 2 other largest factions and countries on the entire planet of Degum, that could be quite beneficial to us. As much as they hate each other, something tells me they both wouldn't mind funding our little war against the Union because they both hate the Union. And if we're friendly with both of them and we replace the Union, I think you see where I'm going here. I told you, we would have allies. We would leave the capital under the cover of night to ensure that we weren't spotted, traveling in a very small caravan of only 3 people. I trust that we won't be gunned down upon our arrival. There's a little bit too much riding on this for them as well. As we were traveling to these peace talks with a world leader, in the meantime back home, our kinfolk were sending more and more of their Union soldiers to the slaughter of our city. And as if they couldn't disgrace all those who had came before us any more than they already had, they had even brought one of our holy animals here for the battle. Nevertheless, we will do what we have to. We will not waver, nor will we falter in our glorious holy mission. As they came trotting across the bridge into the city's entrance, we fired upon them, making a strategic retreat back into the city. Because they had similar numbers to our own with our little peace party out of the city, we had to ensure that we could still get the upper hand on them, drawing them in near our city's buildings. That way we could take cover behind the doors and places like that, giving us the advantage. Unfortunately though, one of them would make their way towards our Kimroot crops and begin setting them ablaze, causing a massive chain reaction, so I apologize for your screen shaking for the last of this fight. But even after they had destroyed countless thousands of dollars worth of Kimroot crop, they wouldn't even come a fraction of the way to breaking our spirits. And with our resolve holding strong, we would kill every single one of them or cripplingly injure them, saving our city from a massive destruction, our mission from a complete failure, as well as our own lives. Thanks to our previous battle experience and our field training, not a single one of our own souls would end up dying, and we would even end up tending to many of our enemies to attempt to rehabilitate them and show them the way. But whether they open their eyes to the truth will be completely up to them. We can't force them, we can only show them the true light of the Thromboian race. But if they're blinded by lies and foolishness, we could always execute them. To be honest with you, we were already considering the possibility of execution given the fact that all, and I do mean all, of our Kimroot was completely gone. But as they say, you attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. The city was in shambles from the attack. Most importantly, we had some critical damage to our infrastructure, in particular our power grid that we'll need to fix. It does appear, however, we ended up getting a few luxurious items such as alcohol, some ancestral weapons like swords, hammers, and we also ended up getting some modern firearms. Was it worth having to kill one of our religious holy animals, ancestral animal? Probably not, but it had to be done. We'll dispose of this glorious beast properly. Now that the threat is currently neutralized, or at least for the time being, we'll go ahead and start the repairing and reconstruction efforts, and in the case of our crops, replanting efforts around the city. In the meantime, it would seem that our fearless leader Wolf has finally arrived at these peace talks. Well, now that's unexpected. Not only were peace talks a complete success, but the Republic of Libertas and the Oak Foundation are now our allies. Well, trading partners. We're still currently neutral with them, as you can see, but we're becoming fast friends, it would seem. Wolf, old boy, you're not just one of the best damn warlords Degum has to offer, but you are one hell of a diplomat, it would seem. And it looks like Arison even has quite the surprise for Wolf as well, to celebrate his successful diplomatic mission. The mech link from the brain of the Mechanitor from battle previously, I'm sure you remember. And she's even made a few modifications of her own, making installation much easier by just simply placing it into your ear. I won't bother you with the specifics and semantics of it, but just know that it was quite easy for Wolf to go ahead and take on this mech link. Now, not only do we have more allies, but we also have the capability and possibility of having our very own small little mech army at our command. This day just keeps getting better and better. To wrap things up into a nice little bow, we are going to continue working on the infrastructure and services within our little capital here. We're actually going to be building ourselves a proper hospital, somewhere where we can go once we're injured instead of our bedroom, somewhere we can actually go, other than the bedrooms once again, to try to heal a bit faster than we currently are. And somewhere we can rest after maybe having a few operations. Perhaps we get some more mech links that actually require surgery, or possibly some bionics. Something else that's come to our attention, we've upgraded our defenses on every other entrance around the city, except for at our bridge, perhaps where we get the vast majority of raids. So we're going to build some proper embrasures there, as well as some better turrets, much better than the scrap turrets that we have been using. We would also end up accepting our very first trade caravan from the Republic of Libertas. Time for us to improve relations a little bit. And this caravan would actually end up selling us many car parts. Now, as previous tribespeople who are attempting to modernize, we're not sure how to make combustible engines and all the things that are required, but if we buy these parts, we can surely make our own. With the parts and schematics purchased from the Rebels, the very first vehicle that we would end up creating, which probably comes as no shock, is a simple roadkill tank. Obviously, there are much better choices and much higher tier vehicles of war, but we don't exactly have access to those or the blueprints and schematics for them just yet, so this is the best we can do for now. We had also purchased enough that we could go about making ourselves a scytheman as well. A simple transport vehicle, nothing too fancy once again. Now the real challenge begins, teaching all of these Thromboians how to drive a modern vehicle. Wish me luck. Now that we finally have some vehicles of our own, today marks the day that we finally open up and begin production of our very own chem fuel as well. We hope to be a gas capital in these lands at some point, And we're going to try to begin now, laying down the foundation and groundwork right here in this building. With our vehicles being as large as they are, and most of our city entrances only being large enough for animals and us being mounted on those animals, we also needed to construct a new bridge specifically for vehicles. But in the middle of the night, we received notification that our 2 Union prisoners, the 2 fellas we were trying to show the light to, were escaping. We began rushing to them and chasing down these dumb animals. We thought that we could help them, but it is clear to me now that there is no help for them. Their minds are totally gone, and they would rather believe lies. And thus, we would end up killing the both of them. We thought that there was potential in them, but there was nothing but an abyss, a black hole, an emptiness, if you will. We gave them a chance, and they squandered it. Their last chance, that is. Now that we've picked out the weeds from our blossoming garden, it's time for us to get back to work on our vehicle bridge and also mining out the large hill that is going to be in the way of it. Eventually, we would finally finish this up, although it still needed a little bit of tweaking. We can't just have a big, undefended, open bridge here. We could end up having tanks roll across, and not the friendly kind at some point, so we would also end up building an automated garage door. This will give us the opportunity to choose who comes in and out of our beautiful capital. Obviously, we need that kind of leverage given the circumstances. And with that, the capital is coming along very nicely. Though we didn't really get to recruit any other soldiers to help us defend it here within the city limits, we have done a lot of work on our infrastructure and also just expanding our defenses in city in general. Speaking of expansion though, our nation has grown to a size so large that we can no longer use the radio terminal to communicate with everyone. We actually ended up having to build ourselves a comms console. Not only will this help us communicate for trade routes and things like that with distant settlements and factions like the Republic and the Marshal Service and yada yada, so on and so forth, but it's also going to help us with communicating and instructing our troops on the battlefield. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. Now that we've pumped a lot of time, resources, and money into the equipment of our troops, I think an invasion is long overdue. Well, it appears that the invasion is going quite well, all according to plan. I'll see you later. Well, welcome back, my rambunctious revolutionaries. I'm glad you could join me again today. I could use all the damn manpower I can get. Last time I saw you, we had just built 2 big, beautiful vehicles. Our first of what we hope to be many that will help us out in our war effort, of course. But we do have a great point by our friend Gish Kramer 1702, who was saying that the current vehicles that we're building don't exactly fit this type of empire. And you know what? I agree. Also, they're very expensive and complicated to build, and some pickup trucks and more simplified vehicles would probably work out a lot better for us. And that is exactly why I have added a new mod to the mod list, the Vanilla Vehicles Expanded Secondary Weapons mod, allowing us to build some machine guns and other types of weaponry onto some very simple vehicles like trucks and cars and yada yada. Now, something that we didn't have last episode that we definitely need and what we're going to be currently building is a proper garage where we can go about building all these car parts. Now that we've bought the schematics and blueprints and also the types of parts themselves off some of our rebel and martial allies, we need a proper place to produce them for ourselves so we're not constantly relying on trade for them. Are we going to be able to produce advanced circuitry here that's going to allow us to build some great big tanks and whatnot? No, but we should be able to make some of those trucks. Wolf himself would be the first to begin some of this production, along with Quinn. However, we are going to need quite a few car parts, so we'll check back in on them in a moment. As of right now, it would appear that we have quite the crop of horses, and also a moose that was tamed at some point, self-tamed most likely, but for the last few episodes, we have a lot of our horses breeding and giving birth, and I thought it might be a good idea for us to take them out and sell them to some of our allies who might be using them for some more off-road missions. But our allies also like to do some of their missions and fighting on the road, and for that they're going to need some fuel, which we have luckily been refining plenty of to sell. We're going to be heading a bit to the northwest here to do some trading with the Oak Foundation, selling them off all of the mentioned products and animals, of course. But not only are we going to be making plenty of silver for the capital's treasury, we're also going to be indulging in a little bit of the Republic of Libertas's culture, you could say, for they are the largest producer of the finest types of alcohol on the entire planet. They also have a few things that we're not able to produce ourselves, like reinforced barrels that we can use for mortars and also artillery. The types of weapons that come in very handy during war, as you might imagine. And even though we were just discussing how we're only going to be producing our own car parts, we would end up purchasing some as well, because it was just that much more convenient, of course, and we were making a lot of money off this trade anyhow. While we were out and about, some of our scouts had told us about one of their friends getting injured and attacked by Union soldiers on the road, and they had to leave him behind. Of course, there is a no-man, Thromboyan man, left behind policy around these parts, so we would send our trade caravan out to rescue them. In the meantime, though, while they're traveling there to his location, we were finishing up our two first speed runner pickup trucks. This lightweight design was actually created by a Thromboyan himself that owned some type of massive hotel chain, and they were optimized for carrying products back and forth for trade, something like that. But we're going to be strapping some big old machine guns onto the back of them on the bed, where some of our soldiers can stand and fire at the enemies. The two first of what we hope to eventually become a mobile battalion. They would also double as city turret defenses as well, though they do have to be manned 24 hours, so we'll still be relying pretty heavily on our automated defenses as well. Now then, by this point, our trade caravan had finally arrived at the location of the wounded soldier, and indeed, he was very much wounded, but thankfully, he seems to still be alive. However, it seems his attackers are still in the area. As a matter of fact, it looks like they've set up some type of temporary camp, almost knowing, no doubt, that we would end up sending a squad out to try to rescue him. Well, unfortunately for them, they were right. We would immediately begin laying down fire against the enemies. Two of them were wielding rifles, and another was wielding a Thromboyan ancient sword, of course. We tried to distract them as much as we could, that way Morg could sneak into their little camp and rescue our own. Though once Morg's stallion was shot in the head, this didn't go quite as smoothly as we had hoped. Thankfully, we were able to lay down enough fire to distract those with rifles, and we could even kill the melee attacker for Morg to get away. We would continue laying down cover fire as he escaped with our new friendo. Their escape very much slowed down by the fact that his stallion was still bleeding out and unable to move. Sorry, old boy, looks like we'll need to leave you behind. Eventually, though, by the grace of our ancestors, we would finally escape the area with everyone intact, thankfully, and we began heading back to the capital. The journey was long and also a bit harsh, given the fact that we had to keep Morg and Oscar from bleeding out on the way back, but eventually we would arrive. To the surprise, of course, of two armed pickup trucks guarding the vehicle entrance here. Happy surprise nonetheless, though. An even happier surprise was when Chieftain Wolf here ended up greeting Oscar and welcoming him to the capital city. The two of them had a lot to discuss, of course, about Oscar's service, and of course he commended him for his service, but he was also curious curious about the men who had left him behind so they could be dealt with properly. While the two of them are sorting that out though, we finally got to harvest some of our first chem root, giving us a lot of chem fuel, not only to fuel our new vehicles, but of course to sell to our allies, making us a vast fortune, more so than our taxes and other trade combined, I'm sure. Now that we actually have some proper designated growing zones, I'm going to do something I should have done quite a few episodes ago. We're not going to be growing any rice or cotton or anything like that around the ancestral spire anymore. No, we are actually going to be reusing and refurbishing those areas into some proper parks and scenery. This is a capital city and it needs to look like one. If we expect the other nations to take us serious, we need a decent looking capital for when their leaders come here to discuss with us, and something that our people can be proud of as well. But speaking of the vast fortune and the capital's treasury, it is completely full. Almost completely full. We have a lot of money that we've been saving up from trade and taxes, and it's time for us to finally start reinvesting that once more into our nation, all the villages and settlements and towns all around our lands and territories. It's time for us to upgrade all of these places that we've settled and that we've conquered. We are going to be making them bigger. We are going to be making them better. We're going to be making them stronger, not only financially, economically, but we're also going to be improving their militaries. First and foremost, we are going to be increasing the amount of soldiers that we are hiring and equipping, even for some of the settlements that are not quite as rich and as large as some of our other ones near the capital. They're going to be getting some of our Federation soldiers along with some of the militia members who are using makeshift weaponry. If there's an able body with a good set of hands, we're going to put a rifle in those hands. Obviously, from all the upgrades to our military, this also means that we're able to conquer more of the Union's territory and to annex more of these lands for ourselves. And my friends, it is at this point that we can officially say that we are the largest Thrumboian country on the entire planet of Degum. I think we passed that milestone a little while ago, but I am very confident that that is the truth now, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. The Federation is truly the greatest nation as well, although I'm not quite through with the Thrumboian Union. We want to conquer them, but we also want to totally cripple their government, meaning that they won't be able to stop us or to interfere with us anymore. It is, however, time for us to get our hands dirty a little bit. We're going to be creating a few mortars to take along with us on the journey, as well as creating some mortar shells to use in our rampage and conquest. This will also be a great test of the vehicles that we've been creating to see if they are actually useful, and if they are, we can start giving out more plans to create more in other settlements in our territory so that all of our soldiers under the nation can use them, hopefully ending this civil war fairly quickly. Some odd hours later, we would finally arrive as the sun was beginning to set. This was a fair-sized little settlement, but it appeared to be a resource depot, and perhaps it even doubles as a mining settlement as well. Taking out places like this within the Union not only furthers our war agenda, but it also cripples their economy as they can't sell the minerals that they mine. Looks like our brothers and sisters on the other side here, though, also had the same idea we did about refining their own chem fuel to fuel these little operations. That's bad for business. But perhaps the best thing about this little village is that we've actually spotted a council member. As you probably already know, the Union is made up of many different collective tribes, and those tribes have chieftains, and those chieftains are all part of a council, something that Wolf himself was once a part of. Killing him? Now we're talking about crippling their government. But we can't just go in guns blazing, no. We need to have a tactic thought out first. Our strategy is to hit the village with some bombardments. Preferably, if we could hit their chem fuel, that would be absolutely great. Our mortars are going to do a bang-up job, I'm sure, as is the swarm rocket system attached to the back of our Scyther vehicle. Alright then, let's get this party started, shall we? Well, now I think we definitely have their attention, don't you? Time to hit them where it hurts. Using our new strapped-up trucks, we would actually encircle many of their groups of soldiers like sharks in the water, feasting on prey. With them completely surrounded and encircled, there was hardly anything they could do. They were at our mercy. It also helped quite a bit that we continued hitting them with barrage after barrage from our swarm missile system. This would end up causing a little bit of friendly fire against our roadkill tank, unfortunately, but the show must go on. We were ramming every soldier we saw, or at least the ones that we hadn't mowed down with our firearms. The bullets were flying, and the missiles kept pouring in right on top of their poor, pathetic little heads. Unfortunately, though, during this time, the chief and his soldiers would manage to destroy our roadkill tank, and in the process, they would kill our slave Zafra. At least he would finally prove useful and be able to serve the ancestors in his death. We ended up pulling back our vehicles to try to get them to follow us and to chase us, which they did. With their chieftain incapacitated, the others would begin to flee, or at least what was left of them. As you could guess, our trucks weren't too keen on letting too many of them slip through the cracks, though. Well, Chief Terzin, still alive, are you, old boy? I thought you would have bled out by the time we drove up on you over here. We've come quite a long ways from those old council meetings, eh? Me standing over top of you, brandishing my rifle, you in a pool of your own blood and the mud. Ah, good times. Don't bother standing up on my occasion, old pal. What am I talking about? Both of your legs are shredded. You're not going anywhere, huh? I suppose we'll patch you up a little bit. Having you bleed out here on the battlefield is a death much better than what you deserve. Besides, we really need to serve justice in this case and make an example out of you. In the meantime, this little resource depot is going to be razed to the ground. We have our soldiers going through and destroying any and all resources that could be useful to the Union that won't be useful to us. Thankfully, some of the chem fuel that they made actually survived our initial barrages of missiles. They have it and we need it. Now that's what I call supply and demand. Looks like we'll also be getting some bonus points with our rebel allies, as we have a few of their civilians and even their soldiers that were enslaved here. We'll be releasing them very shortly. And with that, my friends, this village, resource depot, mining outpost, whatever the hell it was, and whatever you want to call it, is taken care of truly. With our work here completed, it was time for us to head all the way back to the capital, where we were pulling right over the bridge into the garage and releasing our plethora of resources and weapons and even some mechanoid corpses. Now, what would we want with those silly old corpses? Well, they do have some advanced circuitry as well as some metal and other things that we might find useful, but I'd like to see if we might be able to reverse engineer them. If not, maybe the rebels or someone can kind of help us out with getting some mechs. Wolf does have a chip in his head, so it's something I'd like to explore in the future. In the meantime, we would end up taking and showing Chief Terzin to our finest prison cell. He's going to serve his sentence, but first we need to make sure that his thinking and comprehension, I suppose you could say, isn't blocked out by all the pain. So while Terzin is healing up a little bit before his sentencing and judgment day, we seem to have a bit of a power issue. Now, of course, we're running out of room for all of our water mills, so we've also decided to add some solar power in addition to our water mills to power our beautiful city. Good old-fashioned clean and green energy. It's like giving the planet of Degum a little smooch on the cheek and saying, "Thank you for everything, Mama," or something like that. Our vehicles, on the other hand, not so much, but that's a problem for the future. We are at war right now, and some sacrifices have to be made. With our power generation issue taken care of, now we need to fix the issue of where to store it all. The city is substantially larger than it was when we initially built this power storage facility with all the batteries, so we're just adding in some additional ones as well as a fuse to catch any issues and make sure we don't have an explosion in our power grid. I also noticed that we had completely forgotten to dispose of the corpse of our slave. Now, if he weren't a slave to us, we probably would have cared, but this does bring up a good question. Where the hell are we putting all these corpses? Well, lately we've been stashing them all behind a mountain, but no more of that. It's time that we get really civilized, and we're going to be building ourselves a cremation building in the outskirts of the city, somewhere that we can actually keep all the corpses of our enemies and allies alike, and we can actually burn them. Now, proper Thromboians like ourselves, not an enslaved Thromboian who refused to convert and understand the true light of our ancestors, we won't be cremating, but for Zafra here, we definitely will. May the ancestors guide you to the true light in the afterlife, Zafra. Godspeed, little fella. Godspeed. We would also end up making some pretty minor improvements to our defenses of the city as well. In the southern entrance, southeastern entrance, I should say, we ended up adding in some more proper turrets, as well as a scrap turret in behind the embrasures there, where we can also shoot out at enemies. We threw in some steel bear traps, as they are much better than the spike traps. They're resettable, and they do much more damage. Just some simple defenses, nothing too fancy. And I must say, with all the recent additions onto our capital city, it is coming along very nicely and is damn near finished. Whereas once we had a small riverside village here, we now have a booming capital city as we wanted. Sure, we still have plenty of improvements and additions to make, but we are pretty close and it is coming nicely. In the meantime, while we are worried about expanding, our soldiers nearby are doing pretty well at conquering. So well, in fact, that they are beginning to take the vast majority of settlements that they attack, and are even forcing the Union soldiers to retreat to nearby abandoned cities. Let's take a look. Well, I'd call that a successful mission, wouldn't you, Abanair, old pal? But there's still much more ground to cover and much more to do. For example, we have a celebration to attend. Ah, blessed joyous news, my friends. Glorious days. The chief is finally healed up enough that he's not in some type of pain coma, and he is fit to stand trial for his transgressions against the Federation, the one true Thromboian nation. You see, the only problem there, Chief, is I'm not only the judge, but I'm also the jury and the executioner, and I've already considered you guilty for quite some time. May the ancestors have mercy on you, for we shall not. Oh, I can't tell you how good that felt. I suppose it should come as no surprise, but everyone felt that that was a very satisfying public execution, and I can't say I blame them. This filthy traitor deserved the worst, and that's exactly what he got. As I mentioned before, it's about making an example and sending a message. But if you thought that was satisfying, now comes the really satisfying part. Loading his corpse up into a transport pod. Oh, what's that? You thought we were going to burn his corpse? Oh, you poor dumb animal. No, we are going to be sending him back to the Union. Perhaps that will help them really get the picture, and also it should really help cut their morale in half, I would think, especially for his tribe. Message received loud and clear. See you later. Well, welcome back, my ancestor-honoring militants. It's good to see you back in the capital city today. We have a lot to do and foes to conquer. As I'm sure you well remember, we are currently right in the middle of a civil war between us, the Federation, and the Thromboian Union after our parting of ways. And today we plan on putting the final nail in their coffin and winning this war once and for all. Since we've found founded Ancestors Landing, our capital city here, we've been making some pretty major improvements, turning it from a teeny tiny little village into a proper capital, of course, and something we've sort of been focusing on, especially in the last few episodes, is our defenses. Well, the beginning of today's episode shall be no different. The first project that we are going to be tackling is building some high security fences all around the city on the outskirts of the riverbank here. The Union is not like the Confederacy, a big old pushover with some lackluster weapons and armor. No, they have about the same type of weapons and armor and means that we do, meaning they could easily attack us across the river, which we will be preventing now. There is a massive assault brewing from the Union, I just know it. And I know it because they are our kinfolk. It's exactly what we would do if we were in their position, on the back foot, losing all of our territory, one final fail swoop to try to knock out our command. But we won't be letting that happen. Since the remaining enemy settlements seem to be in the north and also in the east, I would say it's fair to assume that might be where the attack will come from. And since we have so much chem fuel that we've been growing and refining ourselves, why not use that to defend our city against this attack? In particular, we would end up creating ourselves a couple of flame turrets just across the bridge. That way, if there are any enemies coming from that section, they will be burnt to a crisp very promptly. Well, that's the idea at least. If any of the enemies do make it past our flame turrets, they will also be met with us as well as our other automated defenses on the other side of the bridge and river. So we should be fairly well protected now. However, building all these new defenses is really drying out our steel reserves, and thus we are going to need to get ourselves some more. We're going to be sending out a trade caravan to do some trading with the rebels, well, that way we can purchase some steel from them, and in exchange, of course, they can get some of our wonderful high-quality chem fuel. And as a result, we would also end up making ourselves a good bit of money for the city's treasury as well. Ah, yes, just what the doctor ordered. This will be perfect for weapons and bullets and vehicles and turrets and, yeah, I think you get the point. Thankfully, our trucks can haul quite a bit of cargo, and thus we would end up purchasing plenty of steel and even a little bit of plasteel as well, if I'm not mistaken, and it was time for us to head back to the capital. However, on the way back to the capital, we spotted what looked to be an ambush in the distance. Ah, the Confederacy of Benya. It had been so long since we had seen any of their troops, we had almost completely forgotten about them. We were so busy and caught up in our war with the Union. This, my friends, is known as a Thromboian Death Squad, a special squad from the Confederacy of Benya with highly trained soldiers who are normally only used to take out high-value targets. I suppose that's what our caravans have become to them at this point. I'm not quite sure. We'll need to be extremely careful though, as they have brought some barrels of chem fuel along with them, and something tells me, since they're holding sticks of dynamite, they plan on trying to destroy the road and possibly blow us up. Such a shame they weren't better hidden, otherwise this little plan of theirs might have panned out. Thanks to the turrets on the back of our pickup trucks, we could easily destroy these barrels, even utilizing them against the death squad itself. And without their barrels of fuel to detonate, all they could really do was throw some dynamite at our trucks, which, as you could guess, didn't really pan out for them all that well. Finally, there was but one of the death squad members remaining, and we promptly ran them over. And with that, this little battle was won, and they wouldn't even be able to get their grubby little fingers anywhere near our precious cargo or our soldiers. Although we ended up taking quite a bit of damage to our trucks, everything should be fine since we're about to go back home. Oh, a caravan from the Thromboian Union. It would seem that that death squad from the Confederacy was not for us and our little trade caravan, but it was actually for this Union squad, which seems to be comprised of Chief Taki herself, one of the members on the council for the Union, as well as her honor guard, many of which equipped with our ancestral Thromboian swords, and also a few modern-day rifles. Let's hope that our trucks can hold out, because we plan on implanting their skulls right between the grills of both of them, and by that I simply mean that we're going to be running these bastards over. Unfortunately, one of our trucks would end up being destroyed, meaning that Twiggy and Morg would have to continue on foot, running for any escape route they could find, as the others would continue running over the honor guard until their truck couldn't handle it anymore, and they too would have to continue on foot with a little slice from our own swords. Such a damn shame. We have to slaughter our own brethren, all thanks to the pride of folks on the council like Chief Taki here. Oh, Commander Wolf is going to be quite tickled that we've caught yet another council member to execute. Although traveling back home is going to be a little bit harder since we ended up losing one of our trucks and yet another of them is very damaged. Given all that we have survived in the last few short hours, I'd say we came out pretty damn lucky though. In the meantime, back at the capital, we're actually going to begin upgrading our research and means of doing said research with a high-tech, yes, research bench, as well as a multi-analyzer. This will obviously allow us to do some much more high-tech and modern research projects, not exactly for the one that we're currently looking into, which is going to be turret packs, but there are plenty others in the future that we are interested in, of course. Turret packs are going to be great for the Civil War, as it's basically going to allow us to equip any of our soldiers with a little automated companion at a moment's notice. Some odd days later, though, and our trade caravan would finally arrive back home with the enemy chieftain in tow. We were quite sad about the loss of one of our trucks, as we would have to leave behind quite a few resources as well. We just didn't have the hauling capacity, but we still ended up with plenty of steel as well as car parts. We ended up taking the chief to her new and last possible dwelling on the planet of Degum. Ah yes, Taki, you were always one of my favorite council members. You seem to have such a good head on your shoulders, and yet when the Federation separated from the Union, you decided to stay where you were. The worst decision you've ever made, as I'm sure you're finding out now. Now then, we have lost one of our trucks, and since this has happened, it's time for us to replace said truck. So we're going to begin by building a lot of car parts, and we actually planned on building about 3 or so, which of course seems like a good idea, but in one of the corners of our territory, I noticed some wreckage. It appears to be an old Wissint truck, basically a troop transport truck from the SNR Rifle Company, most likely one that was damaged and or destroyed, obviously, by the Union many a year ago during one of their skirmishes in these lands. Basically, long story short, I think we might be better off using our resources right now to try to refurbish this truck and utilize it for ourselves. Yes, obviously, it is going to take more car parts as well as time than your standard pickup truck or even 3 of them, but it will also be able to haul a lot of troops. So I feel that it's well worth it. Now, the process of which, as mentioned, will take quite a bit of time. So, in the meantime, we are going to continue making many an improvement all around the city, as well as refining more and more chem fuel for sale and for our allies. By this point, it almost seems like the local Libertas and Marshal Service settlements in the area are competing to see who can buy more from us to fuel their vehicles and to fuel their war against one another, killing each other, of course, not that we mind. A bit of time later though, and we have finally finished our research into turret packs. These little babies are quick and easy. How about a demonstration? Thankfully, they don't cost all that much to make, and they have a battery life of about 5 or so hours. Absolutely perfect for laying down cover fire, as well as saving your little ass in a pinch, if you know what I'm saying. And the best part about this technology, just like our armor that's much more advanced, the Union doesn't even have them or any equivalent to them. We decided we were going to test out this new technology on a new heavy soldier class that we've been working on, wielding the new turret pack, a handheld mortar, and even a slightly more upgraded version of their armor. Obviously, funding this new class of soldier, as well as attempting to equip all of our other soldier classes with this new turret, is going to be quite expensive, but as you can see here in our city city's treasury, that shouldn't be an issue. We have been doing quite well in the Civil War, but we need to do better. We need to speed up our victory, and I think that these turrets are going to be an absolute godsend on the battlefield, as well as our new heavy class. Well, if you ask me, it looks like our new tech on the battlefield, as well as our new heavy units, are providing more than ample support. All just a matter of time now. In other news, our fearless commander has finally refurbished that Wissant truck and is going to be taking it back to the city for a few upgrades. While the vehicle is great on its own for troop transport, we also need to be able to protect those troops, and I think it's time we put a few of our very personal modifications on it, such as 3 large machine gun turrets. Now we're talking. This is more of the Federation style, if you ask me. With this, we'll be able to protect our troops from every single angle all around the truck, as well as kill as many enemies as humanly possible when we're out on a patrol or an attack. Luckily at the moment though, we don't have any attacks. We simply have some allies coming to do some trading. An exotic goods trader from the Oak Foundation, funny enough. Now that we're allies, it would seem that they've actually brought many an ancient tome and novel of our ancestors and the history of Thromboians written by Thromboians, and they've decided to sell them to us. Awful kind of them. But we weren't just interested in purchasing literature from them, we would also end up buying our very first mechanoid. Now, I realize this isn't one of the ancestral and ancient mechanoids created by our people long ago that the Union uses, but it was much easier than going out and finding an ancient danger to try to get one, and besides, look how cute and dangerous he is. Now, I am gonna level with you, that mechanoid and those ancient texts were extremely expensive, but we just had all that money sitting around in the treasury. It's not like we were going to do anything with it. With all the new territories we've conquered, we have an overabundance, of course, and besides, I think he's going to be very useful to us. He would need a proper name though, of course, and given his role in our military, I thought that we might go ahead and just call him Purifier. Pretty self-explanatory, I would think. Once he's finished helping us cleanse and purify our own lands, he'll be able to help us cleanse and purify the rest of the planet from humans. Speaking of, as I'm sure plenty of you remember, there are many humans within our slave forces here within the city, our labor force, I suppose we could call them, and we do have them currently living in the same housing as our Thromboians. This is a big no-no and something that we should have taken care of a long time ago. Thankfully, we are now going to be building some brand new slave quarters within the city, and they will have their proper place away from the rest of us. It's already bad enough that we have to work alongside human governments and factions and pretend that we like them and don't plan on killing them all eventually to take our planet back. We don't need to be sleeping next to them. Since a lot of their duties have to do with refining the chem fuel for us to sell to our allies and to fuel our very own war, we decided to build their quarters near the chem fuel refinery. As one might imagine, this should make them much more efficient and effective in their duties. Above these quarters, we would also end up building ourselves a place of worship. Now, I realize it might seem a little strange to build this above the slave quarters, but I like to think of it as our ancestors keeping an eye on them, and this might be able to help keep our slaves in line and possibly even convert them ideologically. This place of worship is basically the magnum opus of the entire capital, beautiful as it is efficient with its purpose. Its purpose, as put by our good friend Dragon King Mark, who ended up suggesting this, is not only just for worship throughout the city though, it is actually also going to be a place of storage for ancient Thromboian items, artifacts, tomes, texts, things like that. And that is is why, if you notice, we have many different types of storage facilities like bookshelves all over the place, as well as an artifact storage area, but we also have quite a few desks where people can actually study these ancient tomes and literature as well. Not only for our fine folks in the capital to educate themselves, but for all of our surrounding towns and territories with all of our peoples. The hope is that all of our pure Thrumboians that we govern shall make a trek maybe once a year or just every so often to visit this place here in the capital and to educate themselves about our ancestors and their heritage. Across the street, we would also build ourselves something of a drug lab, I suppose you could call it. You see, our heritage doesn't just come with some worship and some smacking of drums. Our ancestors also like to synthesize things like the ancient juggernaut serum, something that will help us out quite a bit during every battle. However, it is incredibly rare to create as it requires bioferrite, which is a very rare mineral that only pops up in a few different little veins here and there. Incredibly useful, but we shouldn't plan on distributing it to every soldier. Speaking of which, it is time for us to initiate a few final attacks against the Union to finally conquer what is left of this territory that rightfully belongs to us. But before we do so, we shall hold a grand military ceremony in the name of all those who have come before us. You can think of it like a ceremony where we request the good luck, good fortune, and protection of the ancient Thrumboians. We would beat on our drums in a rhythm so loud that we would hope they could hear it in the stars. We would also read aloud from our ancient text in the ancient Thrumboian tongue. All in all, it went pretty well, and the whole thing was pretty fun. Let's hope that that equates to good fortune from the ancients. For it is now time for Wolf to give the order, the final attack against the northern territories. And it would seem that our pleas for protection and goodwill and good fortune turned out pretty alright. Out of the 8 remaining villages and territories in the north, we would take about half of them. Make no mistake though, this assault against the north is not over just yet. This is actually just the beginning, and within a matter of a few hours, we should own the last remaining stronghold of the Thrumboian Union. Once we take the lands that are rightfully ours, we will be the 3rd most powerful faction on the entire planet, behind the 2 human governments, of course. And then soon we'll be able to take the entire world. But first, it looks like we have some cleanup to do. There's that raid that we've been expecting this whole time. One last final try, eh, Union? Very well, we shall humor your pathetic efforts to try to stop us. Each and every single soldier they have is armed to the absolute teeth, with many a mechanitor in their ranks, as well as the ancient mechs and thrumbos. Worst of all, though, perhaps, is the fact that they're being led by 2 separate chiefs. Worst for them, I should say. It looks like we'll be finishing off the Council of the Union right here and right now. No point in wasting time, as they were sitting around and trying to plan out how to attack us across our mighty bridges. We started firing mortars at them, easily helping us weaken their forces before they even began to make their way here. As that was going on, we all began rushing to our mighty war vehicles to mount the ultimate defense. Not only from here at the capital, but we would also quickly call in reinforcements from our surrounding towns. This was fixing to be the bloodiest battle in the entire history of the Thrumboian race. And in those gallons upon gallons of blood would stand our mighty fearless warriors. As our reinforcements flanked them from the south, we began to engage from the north, not only with our trucks and machine guns, but also with barrage after barrage of mortar and rocket shells. Think of it like softening your food before you decide to eat it. If we could make many of them bleed, they would be all that much easier to kill. Thanks to our vehicles, we could easily encircle all of their forces like shooting fish in a barrel, but the unfortunate part is their mechs were tearing away at our vehicle's armor, meaning we would eventually lose one of our trucks, Oscar and Morg, who were part of that truck forced to try to flee on foot, would also fall during combat. We would have no time to try to rescue them either, as the Union was absolutely relentless, pushing closer and closer with every passing moment until eventually we had finally ran over and shot enough of them to death that they decided to flee. As their cowardice got the better of them, we would continue bombarding them with many a bullet as well as explosive shell, ripping and shredding their bodies apart. We did our absolute best to exterminate as many of these swine as we possibly could, but as expected, a handful of them at the very least would end up escaping and surviving. Even though many of their soldiers hadn't died and they did get away from us, it looks like the two chieftains were not so lucky. Their limbs completely shredded from our rocket barrages. Not to worry, you poor souls. We'll take you in and take extra good care of you. Besides, I'm sure Chief Taki here will be quite excited to see her fellow council members. You'll all be in such good company. With the battle over, now it was time for us to take care of our fallen. Oscar and Morg, two mighty warriors, true Thromboians. We would end up burying them inside our new cathedral, our place of worship. I couldn't think of any warriors who deserved it more than them. And they had given it all in the name of our nation and for our cause. And for that we owe them everything, more than we could ever provide. But the last remaining Thromboian Union territories will have to suffice for now. As you can see, all of the territories, villages, towns, and cities of the main continent are under our control, part of the Federation. Long ago, there was talk of the Confederacy and the Union joining forces and becoming one massive state and one massive power to fight against humanity. That never happened. Well, until now, I suppose. Both governments now control these two teeny little islands just off the coast of our territory. We'll let them keep that for now, and we'll celebrate our victory. Not to worry though, in the very near future, we'll be coming for them. Now that our nation is completed, and not only that, but also our capital, our ancestral spire, our ancestors' landing, all of this finished, every single goal that we had set out to accomplish, we flourished in doing. There is only one thing left for us to do. Yes, today it is official that the Union has fallen, but truly, council members, it fell long ago under your leadership, thanks to your pathetic decision-making, and for that, you must be held accountable. Before your punishment, you must be stripped of all dignity, including your clothing and armor. Justice has finally been served. The immense pride of all those who had come before us now flowing through our veins. We're finished. Our mission finally accomplished. But now the question arises, which human faction should we attempt to topple first? The United Traitors Union was hardly of any concern, as they seemed to be fairly neutral and only hoping to make some money. The Republic of Libertas has many Thromboians among its ranks and civilians. We may be able to topple them with more diplomatic measures. But the Marshal Service, I believe they may require more aggressive measures. Until next time, my little soldiers. Hello, I just wanted to pop in at the end of the video here to say thank you. Thank you ever so much for watching the super cut of the, I guess we're going to be calling it the Dictator playthrough, the Thromboian Warlord / Dictator playthrough. We got some big things happening in the RkRu. It's a lot of fun, and like I mentioned early on in this video, the super cut here, this was the first time we'd ever played as a Thromboian tribe and kind of delving into those tribes. We did it a bit with the farming empire. I wasn't, really all that capable back when I made that series, or I just didn't do as well with it. So I'm pretty proud of this, and I'm pretty happy with the direction that we are taking the shared universe now. If you guys have suggestions for a series that you'd like to see coming up in the RKRU, feel free to leave those in the comment section down below. I tried to check those as much as possible, and I also try to implement everyone's ideas as much as possible as well. But again, thank you guys for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.